English by the Nature Method by Arthur M. Jensen. Brought to you by Ayan Academy.
Chapter 46. A Sunday Morning in the East End. Most people do not work on Sundays. They rest from their usual work. In England, Sunday is therefore also called the day of rest. But Marshall, like many other Englishmen, was not the kind of man to rest very much on a Sunday. He often went into the country or spent the day on the river. That was his kind of rest. People in foreign countries think that Englishmen go to church 2 or 3 times every Sunday. But as soon as they come to England, they make the discovery that, although many Englishmen go to church, the English as a nation spend their Sundays doing many other things as well. Storm had been with other foreigners in this manner and had made the same discovery, that Sunday in England is not what it is said to be. One Sunday Marshall said to him, "I am sure that you have wondered what people do in London on Sundays. If you have time, we could spend the whole day visiting different interesting places. I will not tell you in advance where we're going to see, but you may be sure that there will be many surprises." "I should like nothing better," Storm told Marshall. To begin with, they went right through the city by bus until they reached the East End. Here they got off the bus. Storm had been to that part of London before and was very pleased to be able to recognize it. "Marshall, London is so big, not only to a foreigner, but even to many Englishmen, so I can quite understand that it must be very pleasant to recognize a place where you have been before." Storm and Marshall now left the main street and entered a side street which was filled with thousands of people. Storm had seen a crowd of 50,000 at the football match, and the crowd of people in this street seemed to be nearly as big. Along both sides of the street there were sellers, who were crying at the top of their voices to make people buy their goods. Each seller seemed to be trying to cry louder than his fellow seller. The street itself was rather narrow, and being so filled with people, it didn't leave much room for traffic of any kind. It was very different from the main street, which was very wide, with room enough for the great bus traffic to East London. Most of the side streets in this part of the town, however, were not very wide. Marshall, a place of this kind, where people do their buying not only in the shops, but in the street itself, we call a street market. All over the country we have street markets like this. Many of the sellers had baskets on their arms. Others were holding up their goods in both hands, so that everybody might see what they had. If the goods were not held up in this way, the sellers would not do so much business. Storm and Marshall looked into many of the baskets, sometimes asking the prices of the goods. Storm heard that the prices were very low, but Marshall, on seeing his surprise, told him that the quality of the goods were just as low. "You can't expect to get goods of a high quality at such low prices," he added. When passing a woman with a basket of apples, they noticed that she was rubbing the apples hard to make them shine. They would have quite liked some apples, but after seeing the apples rubbed on her dirty dress, they passed on without buying any. All the articles they saw were cheap, but their quality was so poor that they were not worth the money. Marshall said that although the prices were low, he had seldom found anything worth buying when he went to street markets. As they walked along, Storm's surprise increased with every step they took. At last, when he turned to Marshall and said, "Now I am beginning to discover that there are more sides to the English nation than I had thought. But I have also discovered that it is necessary to come to England in order to find out about them. I am sure that when I return to my own country and tell people the facts about the English, most of them will not believe me. If anybody had told me in advance that it was possible to buy goods in the streets of London on a Sunday morning, I should not have believed it myself. Marshall, well, I told you before we started that you must prepare yourself for many surprises. Storm, and I had thought that I prepared myself for everything, but now I see that there is a surprise every minute or two for which I have not been prepared." "Marshall, of course I might have told you all about our trip before we went out, but I thought it would be still better to show you things without telling you about them beforehand." Storm. You are quite right. Of course it has been much more fun for me in this way. Now and then they saw men standing on boxes, speaking, surrounded by people who were listening to them. Some of these men said such funny things that everybody laughed. Many people seemed to have come to the street market not in order to buy anything, but in order to enjoy themselves. When the seller saw a possible customer, 4 or 5 of them would at once surround him so that it was difficult for him to get away. Storm suddenly saw a strange sight, one of the strangest sights he had ever seen. A monkey sitting on a man's shoulder with the man's hat in its hand. The man was not able to see, for he was blind. On his coat was a piece of paper with the word blind, so that people might know that he could not see. The monkey was holding out the blind man's hat, and many people put money into it. It seemed to like its work, and sometimes it jumped from one shoulder of the man to the other. A little later, they discovered a man selling knives which were so cheap that Storm wanted to buy one. But Marshall told him that if he wanted to buy a sharp knife, that is, a knife that is really able to cut, he would have to go somewhere else for it, as it was impossible to get a sharp knife very cheap. Marshall suddenly noticed that Storm was not there, and he could not see him anywhere. 5 minutes passed, and then Storm appeared again, returning round the corner of the side street with a small parcel in his hand. It is always hard for me to find my way about the streets of London. So when I saw a man selling maps of London which were both large and cheap, I bought one, Storm explained. I was really very glad, said Marshall, to see you appear once more. Although the parcel you have in your hand is very small, there seems to be more in it than a map of London. Perhaps, said Storm, I bought 1 or 2 other things at the same time. Who knows? I won't ask you to tell me what you have bought, of course. I only hope that you will not be sorry later on and regret that you bought it. What I have bought, Storm replied, is both of good quality and cheap, so that I'm quite sure that I shan't regret it. Remember, Marshall, he said, laughing, that the money came out of my pocket and not yours. It is almost too hot today, said Marshall, to enter into a discussion. I think it must be 90 degrees in the shade. So it is no wonder if we feel a little hot here in the sun. I propose that we cross the street to get into the shade on the other side of the street. Exercise C. Grammar. Some words tell us how, when, or where something is done. Examples: slowly, easily, automatically, kindly, now, then, already, here, there. These words are called adverbs. The adverbs that tell us how something is done are usually made by adding ly to an adjective. Examples: he walked quickly to the door. They lived happily for many years. She was sitting comfortably in a big chair. Notice that y at the end of an adjective is changed into an I before ly is added, and that le at the end of an adjective becomes ly. Adverbs that tell us how, that is, in what way or manner something is done, are called adverbs of manner. The adverbs that tell us when or how often something takes place are called adverbs of manner. Now, then, already, soon, yesterday, today, tomorrow are adverbs that tell us when something is done. Often, never, usually, always, sometimes are some adverbs that say how often something takes place. Examples: it often rains in England. He is never at home. Adverbs that tell us where something takes place are, for instance, somewhere, there, here, far, away. They are usually called adverbs of place. The adverbs we have spoken of so far are adverbs that are used with verbs. You will also find some that are used with adjectives or with other adverbs to tell us how much. Here are some examples of adverbs used with adjectives. I am not quite ready. You are very naughty children. That is good enough for me. The coat is too big. This is not so difficult. And here are some examples of adverbs used with other adverbs. He spoke quite openly of what he had done. They walked very slowly. You don't come here often enough. It cannot be done too well. Well is an adverb. We are not working so hard now. Hard is an adverb here. These adverbs are called adverbs of degree. Many adverbs may be used for making comparisons. When used in this way, more and most are put before the adverbs. For instance, he talked more quietly than ever before. Who ran most quickly?